You should find yourself bursting with joy when you see this. Chances are it's because you fondly remember how it all started with this. Doom is simultaneously one of the most controversial, influential, and also iconic series in video game history. So iconic, in fact, that the story of its developer studio, id Software, reads like a tale of technological advancements, groundbreaking achievements, and a lot of blood, gore, and heavy metal. And it all began with a lie, an Italian plumber, and a pinch of copyright infringement. So without further ado, my name is Ragnar, and this is the history of id Software. The PC has been the technological benchmark for video games for generations. However, that wasn't always the case. During the late 80s, just a few years after the famous video game crash in 1983, systems like the Amiga 500 or the Nintendo Entertainment System formed the status quo. And although the gaming market was growing exponentially and the personal computer was turning into a standard household item, it lacked the necessary processing power to render video games with the same visual fidelity as its contemporary console competitors. While bestsellers like Metroid, Castlevania, or Mega Man delivered incredibly smooth and responsive 60 frames per second gameplay, the PC simply wasn't capable of delivering these features due to its limited hardware capabilities, which became incredibly evident by the dreadful inferiority of PC ports in comparison. But that was about to change. It all started with a company called Softdisk, which, at the time, was a distributor of a video game disc magazette, a mail-order magazine that delivered low-budget video games to their readers on floppy disks, monthly. To develop their games, Softdisk had employed 4 young, aspiring game developers and paid them to mass-produce simple video games. This team consisted of John Romero, Tom Hall, John Carmack, and Adrian Carmack. No relation. Initially, they had targeted Apple II users, but it was John Romero who had convinced their boss that PC gaming and the MS-DOS operating system was the future of gaming. Softdisk eventually agreed and expanded their market to PC users, but before the personal computer could unlock its full potential and break free from its stigma as a secondary gaming platform, there was still the issue of side-scrolling. Games like Super Mario Bros. Had shown that the incredibly smooth horizontal and vertical scrolling were what gamers really wanted. But the PC, unlike the NES, was not equipped with dedicated gaming hardware, and therefore simply not fast enough to redraw the entire screen each frame. Many game developers had attempted to solve this problem, but no one had succeeded to make it feel as fluid and satisfying as on the NES. It was universally accepted as a technical impossibility. Until John Carmack, the team's lead programmer, one day came to the realization that, with static backgrounds of a single color, it wasn't the entire screen that had to be redrawn, but only the tiles that actually changed. In his spare time at night, he and his colleague Tom Hall created a prototype of Carmack's adaptive tile refresh technique over the course of the next week. When they were finished, they left a floppy disk on Romero's desk for him to discover the next morning. When he found it and launched the game it contained, he was welcomed by a title screen saying, "Dangerous Dave in copyright infringement." He was just expecting some kind of silly joke on the character he had created for older Softdisk games. But when he found out what the copyright infringement part in the title was about, he couldn't believe his eyes. He found himself playing the first stage of Super Mario Bros. 3 on a PC, and the screen was scrolling just as smoothly as it would on the NES, but with the player controlling Dangerous Dave rather than Mario. Romero was awestruck. What his colleague had just discovered was the catalyst that could mean a quantum leap for PC gaming. Thinking about it, quantum leap is a terrible metaphor for a big step forward because a quantum leap is actually an extremely tiny distance. Anyway, Carmack and Hall instantly wanted to start implementing this into future Softdisk games, but Romero convinced them not to waste this groundbreaking achievement on their employer and keep it hidden from them. In the following weeks, they covertly worked on a complete recreation of Super Mario Bros. 3, fueled by Carmack's adaptive tile refresh technology. To achieve this, they secretly took their employers' computers home over the weekends and always brought them back before anyone noticed. And when their work was finished, they sent it directly to Nintendo. For Nintendo, this should have been like Christmas arriving early. Those 4 guys from Louisiana had just given them the opportunity to tap into the rising PC market with their incredibly popular IPs. All they had to do was to release the game they had just been sent and make a fortune. But surprisingly, they declined the offer, because their franchises were the #1 reason for families who already owned a PC to buy their consoles, and they didn't want to lose that kind of leverage on the market. As would be expected, this was a massive disappointment to Hall, Romero, Carmack, and Carmack. But luckily, John Romero had another ace up his sleeve. During his time at Softdisk, his work had attracted the attention of Scott Miller, the founder of Apogee, a company that would later become famous as 3D Realms. Miller had started his company with a radical new business model, Shareware. He cut out all the middlemen and sold games directly over the internet. He gave people fractions of his games to download and share with friends for free, usually the first few levels, and when they wanted to play the full game, they'd have to buy it via mail order. All he needed were talented game developers to craft great games. He discovered John Romero through one of the games he had developed for Softdisk and immediately saw huge potential in its creator. But he was aware that companies like Softdisk had their developers under tight surveillance and wouldn't let anyone contact them directly in fear of headhunters. So he employed a little subterfuge. In order to get in contact with Romero, he went on to send numerous pieces of fan mail through Softdisk, each time under a new alias to avoid arousing attention, but always leaving the same address and phone number at the bottom. Romero kept the mail out of pride, but never bothered to call back since he didn't see through the charade at first. But a few months later, he read an article on Scott Miller and Apogee software, written by Orson Scott Card, by the way, and suddenly found that the address of the company seemed strangely familiar. He compared it to the ones he remembered from his mail and found a match. Being outraged, he picked up the phone and gave Miller a call, confronting him about the fraud letters. Miller instantly apologized and told Romero what he really had in mind. He wanted him to make games for Apogee and offered him a huge cut of the profits. With Carmack's newly invented groundbreaking technology, Romero remembered Miller's offer. So he proposed that he and his guys would develop the technically most advanced side-scrolling platformer for PC, for Apogee software. Miller agreed without a moment's hesitation and paid them $2,000 in advance for the development. Over the course of the next 3 months, next to producing their regular games at Softdisk and once again using their employers' computers without their knowledge, they developed their first trilogy of side-scrollers for Apogee, Commander Keen, a jump-and-run platformer featuring an 8-year-old boy based on a child version of the team's game designer Tom Hall. The protagonist would venture into space in his paper ship and fight the evil Vorticons with his blaster pistol and pogo stick. When Apogee released the game over the internet in December 1990, once again distributing the first stage for free and delivering the full game when people mailed in a check, it became by far the most successful title in their lineup overnight. Before, Miller's company had made $6,000 to $8,000 a month. Commander Keen had garnered a staggering amount of over $33,000 in just the first week alone. The game was an eye-opener for PC gamers. It came with well-designed, addictive gameplay, charming cartoon humor, and best of all, it scrolled just as smoothly as titles on the NES. And through the revolutionary shareware distribution model, it spread like a virus. The guys who made it knew that they were sitting on a gold mine with their technology, and only 3 months later, in February 1991, they quit their jobs at Softdisk and founded their own company. Their initial idea was to call it Ideas from the Deep, but Romero felt that the name was too long, and shortened it to ID. The guys liked it because it was an acronym for their original idea, but also stood for the impulsive part of Sigmund Freud's model of the human psychic apparatus. It was the hour of birth for id Software. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video and learned something useful, please give it a like and make sure to watch part 2 to see how id Software takes PC gaming into new dimensions. Subscribe to my channel for more video game history in the future, follow me on Facebook for news and updates, and if you want to support me with the show, consider pitching in via Patreon. My name is Ragnar, and I'll see you next time on RagnarRox.